Welcome to the Power of Your Voice podcast with your host, Johnny Gorky. You have the power to overcome challenges and fears. Let my voice and the voice of many others show you how to transform these challenges into opportunities. To learn more about future podcasts and read episode show notes, check out my website at www.thepowerofyourvoice.com.
This is episode 53 with Ian Reynolds. He's the business partner and chief solutions architect at Zibtek, which is a software development consultancy firm that focuses on helping businesses build custom software. They help the growth of companies, enterprises, and the visionary firms solve their core business objectives with agile software development. Zibtek's mission is to focus value creation on a client's core business objectives. Ian has spent the better part of his career in consulting and has served in different diverse industries such as finance, oil and gas, retail power, field services, Midstream Energy, healthcare, pharmaceuticals, transformational finance, mergers, acquisitions, reconstruction, e-commerce, retail, and software development. Welcome to the Power of Your Voice podcast, man. It's great to have you on today.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. So you are the partner and chief solutions architect at Zibtek?
Yeah, that's right. So largely, if there's a major technical problem that's related to solving a client need, right? They come to us and they say, hey, I've got this really unique problem in my business. There's no available sort of off-the-shelf software to solve for it. How do I get this thing done? And that's my role to sort of step in, help sort of design the broader solution, connect the business problem with the engineering solution and say, hey, this is what we can do, or a lot of times, we say, here is somebody that can help you, or here is a combination of solutions that doesn't involve necessarily building something off the shelf, but maybe just integrating something that already exists.
Yeah, so people love you, but let's go back. Like I like to dig in a little bit deeper than just what people do, but like why they do what they do. So let's go back to your childhood when you were a kid. How was your upbringing, mom and dad, all that kind of stuff? How did all this kind of stuff prepare you to step into the role that you're in right now?
Yeah, I think my folks were very traditionally minded, right? They sort of had a set career path that they followed, and I was very much on that track, and then just felt really kind of end of college, felt like I couldn't be doing just one thing for the rest of my life, like many folks in my family. So business was really more of, sort of just entrepreneurship, general business was more of the path that I wanted to follow. And so, started dabbling in some things, started a small business, worked in startups for say 8 different products that were brought to market in a period of, 2 to 3 years, and got kind of sick of living under my desk, so to speak. And, went back, did the MBA, then jumped into traditional consulting role and did that for 4 or 5 years, and then ultimately went and acquired my own business.
Now, when you were a kid, like, did you have a role model? Did somebody kind of, you kind of always like technology kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, I was always pretty interested in kind of what was going on from a technology standpoint, but I don't know. As a kid, I was pretty busy. I mean, my parents put me in like every type of sport imaginable, and ultimately stuck with soccer. And then, I one of my fondest memories is high school. I was playing on 3 different soccer teams at the same time, and I was on an outdoor competitive league. I was playing for the high school, and then I was also playing indoor soccer. And I just remember that being a really great time. I mean, I was sleeping. I'd go from one practice to the other, and I'd go in my car, and I would just sleep, and I'd recover between practices, and it was great. I just had, and that was a lot of my childhood was staying busy doing sports. And so I didn't watch a lot of TV, read a lot of books, and it was a wonderful childhood. Does that sort of answer your question?
Yeah, definitely good. Now, would you say maybe working with teams on a soccer field kind of help you prepare you for what you do now? Because I mean, it's kind of the same thing. I mean, you have to learn how to work with people as a team. I mean, that's a very important skill.
Yeah, I mean, it's working with teams, is motivating people, it's pushing people, I think is really sort of the operative thing, right? So as a manager, you have to get people to do things that they really, it's not that they don't want to do, right? They're doing the job, right? They've chosen to work there. It's that they don't think they can do it, right? So I always remember go back to the sports analogy, I had a coach who would always say, your body tells you like, you can't do this. Your body is going to say, you're tired, you should give up. But the reality is you can very easily push past it. And the same thing is true in business. A lot of times people don't want to eat their proverbial vegetables before they have their proverbial dessert, right? People want to do the easy things when they get into work, and they don't want to do the difficult things. They don't want to do the things that are challenging or sometimes just repetitive, right? Sometimes the most repetitive tasks that you do are often the most productive things that you can do.
Yeah, I do hear a lot when I interview people. A lot more say, what I'll do is first thing in the morning, I do the most hardest, most challenging thing. First thing, just get that done and over with. And then throughout the day, it's so much easier than start with the easy stuff. And then once you get to the hard stuff, then you already kind of drain. So it's better to start in the beginning of the day.
That's correct, right? Plus, if you're saying mentally, I'm going to tackle the difficult thing, and then you have the really kind of like the extra stuff, the fun stuff to do the rest of the day, it makes the day go by very quickly. And it's otherwise, if you wait, exactly, if you wait and kind of have that difficult thing linger, then it's just kind of weighing on you all day. And I think that's just kind of as a practical exercise, something I took from sort of the sports world, right? And sort of applied, right? Or a lot of our coaches would have us do the warm-up drills. You spend 10, 20 minutes warming up, and then we would go into immediately doing sort of the physical cardio workout. And then from there, we would get to do some of the more fun drills and then eventually play at the end of the day, right? Play the game. And so business is very much like a sport. I think it's the national pastime, like versus baseball is the American pastime. No, I think it's actually business. I think somebody missed the boat on that quote.
Yeah, well, I kind of think about like school. I remember when I was in school, you have a couple of classmates that are always stressed out because they always wait to the very last minute to finish assignments. But when you get the syllabus and you start working on things ahead of time, and like people are like, why are you so chill? I'm already done with everything. I don't have any stress. Now I can just go to the gym, that kind of thing. Makes it so much easier.
Very much so. Yeah, absolutely.
Now, when you were a kid, did you have any kind of role models, or maybe one of your soccer coaches, grandpas, something like that, somebody that kind of greatly impacted you?
I mean, certainly my parents and grandparents were folks that, I still look up to. I mean, I'll talk about my grandfather. Actually, that's a good example. Very eclectic guy. He was a doctor. I mean, he had flew a plane. He worked during the Vietnam War. He served in the military and actually served overseas. And he, raised 7 kids, and still he ran his own business. He ran his own practice, and still had time to really kind of take care of everybody. Really had time to sort of be a family guy, and it wasn't Warren Buffett, right? But he lived a very good life, and he had a very admirable life. And I think that's something that you can aspire to is, just be the best person you can and use the best talents that you have, and, put your foot out there, do things that are kind of outside of the norm. And he had his eclectic hobbies. I mean, he was I remember when I was much younger, he had a ham radio license. And so he'd bring me up and let me sit and listen, and he had conversations with people. He'd be in Louisiana, so he'd have conversations with people on the East Coast and sort of walk me through that process. And he had he was in the middle of a suburb, and he had a big ham radio tower, and, just kind of have your hobbies. I think that's also part of, kind of doing your own thing.
That kind of goes back to like the days where you could go to Radio Shack and build that kind of stuff.
That's right. Yeah, no, I remember Radio Shack. Yeah, I had a little kit that would let me, I could do like a microphone, and it would sort of like overwhelm all the other frequencies in a proximate area. And I soldered this little kit. And so I would, go to my friends' houses and like, hey, turn on the radio. And I'd have this little thing, and it would take over the radio frequency. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, very, very cool. So when would you say you really got your big start in technology and you were like, wow, this is something I definitely want to do?
So yeah, I mean, in the startups that I helped sort of bring those products to market, there was always this combination of some sort of online presence, web presence. I saw that very much everything was moving to sort of cloud applications, these types of things. And then ultimately, when I post MBA did consulting, I was helping these large enterprise firms build out and install these very large legacy software systems. I mean, they would install the software that was maybe 10, 20 years old, but they would run these, there's billion-dollar companies running on very old software that is kind of hybridized and bastardized with some new technology. And I always thought, well, that's really inefficient. There's ways of doing sort of asynchronous data processing, and they have these very old jobs that they write to a table in a certain way, and it uses a sort of standard database table. And I thought, well, that's very odd. I don't know why such a very large company many publicly traded companies were our clients. Why are they doing something that is sort of by all measures old fashioned? And so I started reading more about that. I was helping these client projects, ultimately moved to the finance side, and I was helping with, I've done something like 20 billion in transactions from M&A, restructuring, advisory, acquisitions and divestitures, et cetera. And, but I still kept reading those things. And ultimately, when I got back to looking to do my own thing, I found the opportunity to acquire Zibtek, which is the current firm. And, had all this knowledge that I'd accumulated from my work doing this sort of software deployment efforts that just kind of carried forward.
So like, what's your experience? Like, why are some companies are so reluctant to really change their software? Because like I worked in the restaurant industry for a while, and one of the big programs that a lot of them use is Aloha. It's a touch screen. I mean, it's so easy to use, very user friendly. Literally, you can't make a mistake. I mean, you can make mistakes, but it's very hard to. And I work in some restaurants where you literally have to type everything. It's very annoying. And it's not like the companies, they're not so big where they can't afford to buy the software. Or you have some, like, they're literally using, say, Windows NT or Windows, no, I'm sorry, like DOS 3 or something. It's like programs are
green
like
screen.
15,
Yeah.
like, are you crazy? Why the heck are you using this trash? Like, literally, just want to take the computer and just throw it out. And they're still using old screens, and it's just like, come on.
Right. No, I think there's two reasons for that. One is the folks who are moving into the CIO, CTO type positions are there because they've kind of grown into those positions, especially with a very large organization that's been around for a long time. They understand the technology, they understand the technology landscape for the business. They're not necessarily trying to innovate, which I think is incorrect on the IT side, but those folks sort of graduate into those positions, and they're also effective leaders. But I think they're using software that's known within an industry, and if it kind of works, don't break it, so to speak. But I think often what gets missed is that there's major cost savings that can come with new technologies, and just being comfortable with the technology actually makes you vulnerable to attack by your sort of competition that is coming in and willing to be a little bit more innovative, be a little bit more lightweight, be a little bit more sort of reluctant to use the new technologies, which are stable. I'll give you an example. I mean, there's frequent jokes that you can do with Python in a couple lines, what takes long, like paragraphs and paragraphs of C programming language, right? And so we see that all the time in the work that we're doing, helping to build and redevelop existing software, where we're just using modern frameworks and we're cutting the time that it would take to do many functions down to days, when previously it'd take weeks to build out, say, just a module.
Now, I'll go into this a little bit later, but seeing that you're just talking about software, for somebody who's listening, maybe they're in school, they're IT professional, they're starting to learn programs, but I mean, there's a lot of different applications that you can learn. what do you think is probably some of the best programs right now that you should really, really learn?
Yeah, if you're studying to go to programming, ultimately you're going to have fluency across many languages and many things. But by and large, there are, let's say, 5 to 6 major programming languages that are being used in sort of industry, right? So there's Java, there is Python, there is PHP, there's .NET, there's Ruby, and then pick your poison for the other one. But by and large, let's also include JavaScript in there, and I'll talk JavaScript a little bit. But by and large, Python, .NET, and like sort of Node.js and general JavaScript technologies are where 90% of the new technologies are being written. Java is still being used, but less so, because you get a lot of advantages with data processing with Python, and you can develop the code much more quickly. It's actually a little bit more secure in certain respects. While Java is a stable technology, you can use things like the Spring Framework. Really, we're seeing most of the new technology be built in sort of Python and regular JavaScript with things like Node.js. So that's what I would study.
Okay, so what would you say the majority of the websites are now running right now?
So, a lot of actually the current web is still running a lot of PHP. PHP was kind of the original web framework. I think the first version of Facebook was written in PHP. And going back to that sort of legacy software question, that's what things were written in. But there's new technologies that are getting adopted, and slowly, actually not slowly, aggressively, JavaScript, just for the web, for example, is really kind of taking over, because I can write an application end to end in JavaScript, and it's reasonably transferable to go from just kind of the front end frameworks to the back end frameworks and write to the database in a very simple way with tools like Mongo database. So definitely JavaScript.
Okay, that's definitely good to know. Now, this is kind of a long thing. I wrote this one down. So back in the 70s and 80s, one of the big things was for a lot of people, when I get out of high school, I'm going to go work in a factory. I mean, my father, he worked in a factory. I have some friends, their parents worked in a factory. It's like, hey, once you get out of high school, man, you can get a job making $20, $30 an hour. All you have is a high school diploma. You're guaranteed a good wage, good benefits, good pension, and worked it for 20 years, and yay, you're living the good life. Now, right. Obviously, things have changed, and now, we're in a whole different state where with so much automation, a lot of robots, it's like my father worked at a factory building outboard motors for a big company. I mean, you had thousands of guys working a line. Now, instead of 1,000, maybe you have 5, and the rest is all these robots. So a lot of these jobs where you used to get people to do it right out of high school, it's like you pretty much have to go to college. Now, what are some of the careers that you think these kids, maybe like 14, 15, 16 years old, and think about, okay, I'm about to graduate high school. What should I do? Like, what are some things you think you possibly could do just graduating out of high school, or maybe someone who's just about to go to college? What are some industries that you think that they should get into? Because there's a lot of industries you could probably get into right now, but honestly, maybe 10 years from now, you're not going to have a job. So what are some really good things that you think for somebody who's listening right now, that these are industries, obviously IT,
sure,
those kind of things.
So yeah, I think that's a great question. And so again, we're a custom software development company, but I would say that really the trade skills, right? Plumber, welder, you talk about people who are working lines, linemen, and these sorts of things. Those are always going to be in demand. And in fact, there's probably a shortage in the United States of skilled labor. And so if you can go into a trade skill, even do community college, don't go to a big 4-year university where you're going to walk out with debt. I would recommend that to actually most people. I mean, I have my 4-year-old is always joking. She's like, I'm going to be a plumber. And I was like, okay, well, that's not a bad idea, actually. That's really great.
Your daughter?
my daughter,
Okay, cool.
So, and I think, that's actually a noble thing. There's going to be a demand for it. I mean, if pipes break, you got to get them fixed, right? There's no.
That's very well said, because I live in Atlanta, Georgia. There's a billboard I drive by every so often. It's owned by a woman. She has like 3 or 4 other women that work for her. And the truth is this: if you're a guy, sometimes guys, unfortunately, they take advantage of women. But if you're a woman and you have a plumbing issue, honestly, if I was a lady, I'd rather hire a woman to fix it for me, because I know she's going to be authentic and she's not going to try to rip me off, that kind of thing. So that's wonderful.
Yeah, but but then as it relates to software, the U.S. is actually not producing enough software engineers domestically, right? So we're not churning people out of schools who are able and capable of developing software in the U.S. So at the rate that we have demand. And so if you go, why is that? It's because I think people will get humanities degrees. They'll graduate with an English degree as opposed to an engineering degree. They don't understand the career prospects sort of available to them. They perceive it as more challenging than it necessarily is. And they say, oh, well, that's for an engineer. That requires, sort of complex mathematics, et cetera. Well, so to that, I would say that's not true. Yes, you're going to make use of the complex mathematics. Yes, you're going to make use of logic, but you can learn those things. It's a skill. So we have hired people who, don't have backgrounds in engineering. They just are interested in learning the technology. I'll give an example. So we had a kid who, it's really kind of a sad story, and then turned into just a wonderful story. His father had passed away. His mother didn't really have any skills. He had just graduated college, and this was right around the time that father passed away. And he's like, I don't know, I'm not really sure what to do. And he graduated with an English degree, and really just kind of, there was a bad job market when the kid graduated. And so, he was looking for an internship. So we said, okay, you can intern with us, but we're going to put you to work. And the expectation is that you learn how to do what's called front-end development, right? So it's really kind of like when I go to a website and I'm interacting with buttons and seeing how screens move around, et cetera, that's front-end development. And so we just put them down. We said, here's what you're going to do. You're going to go through this course, and, we'll see how you do. And, the kid slayed it. He just ripped through that thing. And, so we're about 2 years on now after hiring him. Again, no formal engineering training.
Oh, great.
Yeah, no formal engineering training. And he's leading a team of 17 people. And he's got 2 years. He's got 2 years of experience, right? And he's self-taught. So now I don't think that's the norm with everybody, that you're going to sort of happen into a job where you're going to sort of have a natural inclination to be interested in that, and then lead a team of 17 people in 2 years. But we've hired many people who didn't have backgrounds in engineering, taught them everything they've needed to know, and then put them into a role where they've been able to be successful. Sometimes you're just kind of, really good at, we call it a sandwich, right? So there's front end, there's sort of mid-tier architecture, there's back, et cetera. And so, sometimes people are really good at a layer, but you can be good at the whole thing, or be kind of average at the whole thing and really do exceptional. And so, as to why the U.S. isn't producing enough people, I can't really answer that. I think most people think, oh, that's too complex, I can't do that. But reality is, we've hired people that have been exceptional, that have no background in what it is they do now, but they take those skill sets, they take that knowledge that they have from sort of the English language, and they apply that logic to what they're doing. And programming is something that is going back to the sort of trade skill thing, is very much like a trade skill. You can, just like you can learn to read or write, you can write software.
Yeah, that one thing I really like that they're starting to do now. So I have 2 young boys, one's 7 and one's 10, and they're in school and they have STEM classes. And with STEM, it really gets them into technology and computers and science. And my oldest son, he's really gifted in math. So I'm like, engineering definitely would be perfect for him. Now, the program that you had this kid test for, is this something that you guys developed yourself for the front end?
No. So effectively what we did was we actually, this was 2 years ago. So this was a new office that we were standing up. We didn't really have a formal training program for that office yet because we were so hands-on training some of the senior people we just hired in there. What we did was we actually went and we paid for an external course. I don't remember what it was. We paid for an external course and we said, you get through this course, plus you solve this other problem and build this little sort of module thing. Show us you can do this and we'll hire you. So we basically kind of like left them in a corner and we said, you can ask anybody in the office anything. Just don't interrupt the meeting, but you can go talk to senior management. You can talk to me. You can talk to whomever to get guidance on what it is you need to do. And we'll just kind of let him at his own devices for 2-3 months. And, he did just that. He went and asked the questions. He went and got feedback. He studied. He was probably the first person in the office and the last person to leave. He was the first person in the office, last person to leave. And so just by putting in the work, he got there. And
that's a very driven person. Yeah. I mean, that is definitely good. Now, especially at this moment now, we're still, depending on what state a person's live in, a lot of people are still at their house. But the beautiful thing is you have lots and lots and lots of time. What are some good programs that you would recommend? Obviously, as you said, like Python and Java. Right. Because I mean, the reality is you don't have to go to college in order to learn how to use these programs. I mean, you can spend several $100, if not $1,000 or more. Sure. But it'd be cheaper to learn it on your own, I would think. Right.
Yeah, and in fact, it's going to be difficult to sort of do the really complex stuff on your own, just because like there's so much knowledge. Like, where do I start? And people often get overwhelmed, so they don't start, which is the mistake. But the place to start is go get on like Udemy, go get on YouTube, go get on. There's Code Academy that's free. They also have a paid track, and I think there's another one called Bento. And if you could go through those and just do like sort of get all the front end, UI, UX, HTML, CSS, JavaScript pieces, and then pick either sort of Node.js or Java or Python, and just go through one of those courses. Try to build something that you're interested in. Don't just copy what the course has you do. So build what the course has you to do when you go through that. But when you're done, try to build something that you are interested in, something that you're passionate about, and you can demonstrate to a potential employer and say, hey, look, I built this. I built this from scratch. You can look at the code. You can review my coding standards. You can test it out. You can stand up a DigitalOcean server for, $2 or whatever a month and sort of host your app live. If you can go demonstrate that, that's often more valuable than, really kind of coming out of school with nothing. And we've hired a lot of those people. Our favorite person to hire is probably somebody with at a minimum 2 years of experience, but they haven't been taught sort of the full stack. And so they're still moldable. And there's somebody that we can shape in 6 months to be just a killer engineer.
Well, and that goes into this next question, because the reality is not everybody is very tech savvy, and it's okay. Right. You don't have to be. Now, if you have a person who's listening to this right now, and they're like, you know what, I don't know anything about software, but I know we need somebody that knows software. How do you know if you're going to, like, when you're looking for somebody to hire, to bring on to your team, how do you know if this person's even good? Because, yeah, they got 5, 6, 10 certificates and all this kind of stuff, but it doesn't really mean anything if they don't know what they're really doing.
Yeah, so I think the thing that we look at the most is, is this person going to be really kind of not trustworthy, but dependable, right? We want trustworthy. Trustworthy is like sort of that natural first criteria, but are they going to be dependable? And then if they're dependable and they have a track record of success, right? So our company, for example, we've been in business for 10 years. We've had the opportunity to serve clients like Google and Adobe. We serve the Fortune 500, right? And if we're good enough for the Fortune 500, right, we're certainly good enough for these mid and small size businesses that we serve, and we serve a lot of those. And so look for the track record, look for process, because process more than people is going to win the day. Just like I said, we've taken kids with no background and turned them into stud engineers leading teams of 17 people. We have a process that works both in terms of training, identifying talent, having talent rise up very quickly to sort of, seize the moment. But then also a process in place that allows us people to succeed, and lets us sort of scale these large teams. I mean, we have teams as small as, one person and as large as 20, 25 people where we're supporting organizations building custom software or, sort of everything in between. And most of our competition really can't do those sorts of things because they don't have the lived experience of serving the enterprise clients. So they don't know what those large clients expect. And they're also not templating that process and carrying it down to all clients.
What do they usually expect?
Yeah, I think it's a couple of things. That's a great question. It's clear, consistent communication, right? It's that you're going to do what you say you're going to do. It's, like fair and obvious billing practices. And then, sort of finally, it's your demonstrable engineering competency, right? So we do that by saying, a lot of people say, oh, I can do everything. Well, actually, we say, no, we can't do everything. We frequently turn clients down because A, they're not a good fit, or B, they think that I need to get this huge, massive problem solved in my business that is frankly, you need to have a 1 or 2 year time horizon to solve. And so, we frequently turn people away and say, look, your time frame is not realistic. So when you're talking about building software, again, going back to that kind of sandwich analogy, if people are really good on the front end, if people are really good sort of at that mid-tier architecture, that sort of back end, if you will, and you have people who are really good at the database and server side technologies, it's very rare you have somebody who's just a stud at every level. And we explain that to clients. We walk them through that process. We walk them through our project management process. So we're an agile team. We use Scrum, and most of our clients have heard the word Scrum. They've heard, okay, I know I need to have these user stories. I know I've got to break them down into sort of small dependencies, but that's it. And so part of our process is actually having our project managers train our clients and bring them into the fold of executing that process. So as our clients as we're executing these projects for our clients, as we're sort of getting our clients onboarded into our process, and many times we're sort of training them as we go, giving them little goldfish flakes of like, here's the real deal. Here's how we do it. And this is how we have hundreds of engineers on staff, and this is how we survive.
Now, because technology has changed so much, so I wanted to kind of ask you, where exactly do you see the future with technology, especially because I do know you do have some background in like retail and what is it, also like oil companies and gas companies, that kind of thing. Right. Because technology is so incredibly important. I mean, we obviously see that with like eBay, with Amazon. And just recently, I'm sure you've obviously heard like JCPenney's, GNC, obviously Sears and Radio Shack is long gone.
Right. But
you have these companies that they just don't adapt. They don't learn technology. I was reading something, I don't know if it's 100% true, but like Sears, they hired I believe it was a CEO. The guy really did not care about adapting. I mean, he lined his own pockets, made tons of money, and obviously they're gone now. And Sears, I mean, back in the days, in the 70s and 80s, I mean, they were one of the biggest companies in America. I think they had like over 3,500 stores or something. They were huge.
Right.
So where do you think technology is going? Because I mean, we've gone very, very far, especially with Amazon, but like how much farther can we really even go with these retail companies?
Yeah, I think just like you've sort of talked about, so your dad used to work on a factory line, and now it's fewer and fewer people. I think in many respects, technology it's partially going to go that route, right? So there's stuff even in our industry, which was commonplace that we would have to do as an engineering firm 3 or so years ago, that has largely been not automated, but the industry has become much more efficient. So even in our space, the industry is going to be much more efficient, and it's actually going to be easier to develop certain components of the technology, which is great because consumers are going to benefit, businesses are going to benefit, everybody's going to benefit. So I think we're going to see continued refinement in the development of software through the adaptation of sort of new technologies, right? Node and Python don't, for example, they have the ability to sync data asynchronously. And that technology just by itself hasn't made it into the mainstream of how data moves about across most web applications or software applications, right? So just that change alone washing over the industry over the next 3 to 5 years is going to be tectonic in terms of how data moves. So I think we're going to see more of that, right? And we're very much at the cusp of what these sort of web frameworks and software development frameworks can do. They just kind of haven't made their way into the fold yet. And that's going to accelerate what the engineers are going to be able to do with available technologies. The second piece of that is just what I stated, the acceleration. So technology in our lifetime is accelerating faster than the person who is at the forefront of it can really kind of keep up, right? So I'm going to use the example of my business partner. He doesn't mind that I use this example because we talk about it all the time, is that this guy was a technology leader. He helped IPO a company in Silicon Valley. I mean, he moved out to the Valley, helped grow this company. This was 15 years ago. And he's a young guy. I mean, very, very young, no gray hair, and helped grow this company, IPO'd, exit. And, his skill set really helped found the company. But, 2 to 3 years ago, he recognized, I've got to retool. I've got to relearn how the industry is, making sausage, so to speak, because it has changed since the time that I launched and grew, or helped launch and grow and then exit this company. It's changed so much that he himself, somebody who's basically like done the whole Silicon Valley game, has had to go retool. So in our view, about as fast as a laptop is going to depreciate, it's going to last you 3 years. If you're not sort of retooling every 3 years as an engineer, you're falling behind. So we think that's going to be a continuing trend where in the technology space, you've really got to sort of constantly be brushing up on your skills, learning new languages, expanding your literal programming vocabulary, or you're going to run into problems.
Yeah, I mean, I'm 39 years old. I grew up in 86. I was 6 years old. We used the Apple G6 in kindergarten. Mm-hmm. Played Oregon Trail. I mean, I grew up with technology. First used CompuServe, used AOL, used every single thing. First thing I used was Windows 95. I mean, I grew up with everything, and which is very cool because I've seen how everything has shifted, and it's amazing how every 5 years you literally just take the technology you bought and you throw it in the trash can, and then you buy new stuff. Like I remember when I think one of the biggest hard drives that came out was like maybe 100 gigs. I think you pay like $150 for it, and then $250 came out. Basically, it was a dollar per gig, and now, I mean, you can buy terabytes. I mean, no one ever thought you could buy a terabyte, and now you can buy them in these little drives. I mean, they're so small. It's just amazing how technology just completely what is it? It doubles every 3 months, I believe. Something like that.
Something to the effect. So Moore's law, right? So they're able to basically shrink the number of, or the size of it, basically transistor onto a microprocessor, or at least accelerate speed relatively quickly on a microprocessor. And so I think Moore's law is applying to the software development space in sort of a way that's uncalculable. But the way that companies can continue to innovate is really by following a pretty simple practice. So look at like 3M, look at what Google, and look at what some of these other large sort of idea factories are doing. They're saying like, look, 10% of revenue or 10% of earnings, we're going to throw towards R&D, and we're going to try to solve a problem. We're going to budget some of our engineering time, some of our organization's time towards trying to come up with unique solutions in the marketplace that have never been tried, right? So they have like kind of like study Fridays or something like that, where they're allowing teams to just kind of go, explore ideas. We do something similar in that we take a certain portion of revenue and apply that to basically creating small products. First, things that are going to solve problems within the business, right? So, for example, we were using like Salesforce, and we were using a phone dialer, and we were using some constant contact tools, basically all the things you need to have in a sales team, like a productive sales team. All these tools, we're spending a couple $100 a rep, and we built a sales automation platform in-house. We've been using it for 2 years, and we eliminated all those costs per rep, and then B, now we're sort of out selling into the marketplace, right? So it's a solution that we use, solves our problem, and it's a solution that we can go sell to people. It's called OnCourse. So tryowncourse.com is that application, right? So we're still doing that. We're still taking a percentage of our revenue and a percent of our earnings, and we're just piling it back into R&D to try to go solve other problems in the business. And that's been tremendously helpful about thinking about how we grow as a business given this constantly changing landscape.
Well, I think that's why it's very important, as we've seen with this pandemic that's going on, it's very important to diversify, have different things that you kind of, because if you only do one thing and you're not generating any income, you're in trouble. I mean, why is Amazon, I mean, for a pandemic, they are doing perfect. I mean, they're having issues with transportation, but they finally got things going. You look at Target, you look at grocery stores. I mean, they sell food, they sell some other things, but they have so many different things. So they always have a way to make income, just like what you guys do. You guys have the different programs as well.
Yeah. So the primary program we sell out in the marketplace is this Try OnCourse application. And it really is it's a sales automation platform. It really helps you do all of your sales outbound communication in one place. Like you can do calling, you can do text, SMS, you can do drip sequences with email. It collects all your inbound leads for you and puts them in your CRM or inside of, it's got a CRM built in, right? So has that kind of like deal tracking and pipeline tracking, manage all your communication. We send all of our client communication through it. So again, our primary business is the service business. We've been doing that for 10 years, but we needed a tool to track basically every communication we have with a client and have it in one place. And so we built that. And so we'll probably over time move to adding more products to our sort of total stream of revenue. But, sort of just based on the basic laws of compounding, we would think that for a good long while, the services side of the business is going to continue to grow more quickly than sort of our products business. But then eventually, over a long extended period of time, our products business would probably overtake our service business.
Now, well, what's some of the biggest challenges you guys have had, and how have you guys able to overcome it? And have you been able to implement maybe, hey, this could be another business or this could be another product, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think the first challenge we've had has been logistics, right? So logistics and HR. So it's very hard to hire exceptional talent for a really, really not competitive industry, but an industry where the demand is so high, right, for talent. And so I think the first and foremost challenge we've had and continue to have is how do we get great people who are passionate about going to work every single day, passionate about what they do, and really want to solve hard engineering problems. And we've done that by building a culture of excellence, where one of the things we tell people in sort of a freshman orientation is somewhat like the story I told you, where we don't care how many years of experience you have, it's what you're capable of delivering. And every year, without fail, we have one or two people who are very young rise out of the ranks and very quickly sort of get promoted and get additional responsibility. And so having a very meritocratic culture, talking about that meritocratic culture, and then really pushing for excellence for our clients is the biggest challenge. It's keeping that system going. We had a person that we hired who had, I think it was like 17 years of experience. And he said, I had no idea what good was or what good meant until I started working for you guys, because for the first 6 months I was working with you guys, nothing was good enough. And that, that's right. Like we're working at a higher standard than what most people are sort of used to. And maintaining that is a constant challenge. And that is the number one challenge. The work comes as a result of the quality work that we do, but maintaining that quality standard and bringing that to marketplace, and then sort of, better lack of the word, sort of beating it into the employees on a regular basis is hard to do. And it's hard to do that consistently over 10 years like we've done.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about finding the right people. Because I remember I was bartending when I was in college, my boss, she hired this guy. I remember, I think he said he had like 18 years experience. She was like so super excited. He's like, yeah, this guy's like amazing. He's going to be maybe promoted like manager or something. And then she hired this guy and she's like, oh my God, what was I doing? This guy is horrible. And
Right.
of course, eventually she fired him. But that's the thing. It's like, you just got to find the right people. It doesn't even matter if they have an experience, if this person is teachable, because one thing I've learned too, sometimes if you have somebody who has too much experience, they're kind of stuck in their own ways, and then you got to change it. And that's sometimes a hard thing to do too.
Yeah, very much. I think I'm plagiarizing Bill Gates here, but you shouldn't really measure somebody's experience as much as you should measure their ability to grow, right? So if somebody has a capacity to grow much more quickly than somebody else, it's very likely that person can sort of outshine their competition and become a very valuable resource very, very quickly. And so pay more attention to somebody's capacity to grow more so than experience on paper. And that's generally the approach that we've taken.
Yeah, I mean, truth is you never stop learning. I mean, it's great to continue to grow, but it's important to, be in an environment where people appreciate that kind of thing too. And they offer kind of ways where you can, because I know some companies, unfortunately, they say, hey, we're going to teach you, you're going to get to learn all these amazing things, but unfortunately they don't always deliver on that as well.
Mm-hmm. We take a approach by practice standpoint. So typically before an engineer is placed on a client project, they're working on an internal project for 6 to 9 months. And really we give them the process and then we put them with enough we put them particularly with some senior people where they've got to learn from the senior people and they've got to learn from the team around them, and they're expected to deliver. And if they can't deliver in that 6 to 9 months, we typically sort of move them on very politely. But most people that come in with the right attitude, come in with the right, basically desire to learn, will graduate from that program and then ultimately be a billable engineer. And so it's really much more about that person's capacity.
So you guys do a lot of teamwork?
A lot of teamwork. Our average team size is probably about 3. Cool. But it's 2 people it's probably like, 2 people who are reasonably senior and a junior person. So we skew towards quality and skew towards seniority. And then usually the junior person is somebody, it's like, this is the guy who's showing up early, putting in extra hours because he's maybe not as fast, maybe not as quick as the other guys, but he's going to make up for that in terms of total work hours.
Okay, so you get a junior person, they work with 2 seniors, and that way they get to learn the ropes. And then like every other project, they switch and they work in different teams. That way, they're always constantly learning different things, but from different people as well. Right.
Another thing we do is we take we have a lot of data points. I won't talk about all of them, but we have data points for every skill set, right? And we track that person. We do a review every month. Engineering output is pretty black and white. You can pretty easily measure how productive an engineer is. You're not looking at lines of code, like how many lines of code. You're looking at, especially in a sort of a Kanban system, you're basically assigning points or hours. You're looking at what they've delivered and what gets kicked back in terms of productivity. And so we measure against all of those things. And then what we do is we actively pair them with somebody who is strong in whatever skill set they're weak in as best as possible. Now, it's not a perfect system, but that works exceptionally well, especially for these really large teams where we have, let's say we have 17 people, we divide that in half as best we can. We'll take that team we'll take that team of 17 people, put it in a team A, team B, and team A is pretty well balanced. Team B is pretty well balanced. And so they're operating as 2 independent teams in some respects. But you have people who are maybe strong, like 50% strong on the front end, 50% strong on the back end. And after a couple of months, everybody's pretty strong on the front end, everybody's pretty strong on the back end. And that process is true with smaller projects as well.
That's incredible. I mean, you guys are going to have an amazing team. I mean, people constantly learning and growing.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible, especially seeing some of the more junior engineers mature up as quick as they do.
That's sweet. Now, where do you see, because I kind of mentioned this, but I wanted to continue, where do you see the oil and gas companies kind of going with technology now?
Yeah, so I mean, I still have a lot of friends in the oil and gas space, and we do have some clients in the energy space that we help both doing refining and upstream activities, and then we've done some midstream work as well recently. I think in many respects the upstream market, independent of what international oil producers are doing, in the United States is becoming exceptionally efficient, right? So several times the upstream industry has been wrung out like a wet towel. And I think it's very likely that the efficiency as a result of sort of hydraulic fracturing is going to really make it so that you really need to go after high production wells, especially when sort of you have so much international pressure from the.
What are those?
So let's say, for example, let's just really, really briefly go the example like California versus West Texas.
Okay.
So producing oil in California is very expensive because the type there's environmental regulation. Typically, the type of rock formation under the ground is a little harder to get basically oil out of. Relative to sort of West Texas, right? And then the crude you get is more easily delivered to market. The stuff you get out of West Texas is really high quality stuff. Let's take, for example, so there's another, there's other like really high quality crudes you can get out of the East Coast, et cetera. But the technologies that have gone into producing those hydrocarbons, delivering them from the ground, have gotten exceptionally efficient. They've also gotten very, very efficient about determining how much a sort of geological formation is likely to deliver in terms of how many hydrocarbons. That's been as a result of sort of the use of things like advanced well data. They've mapped many parts of the U.S. and then you also get data from proximity from sort of relative wells in terms of how they're producing, how long, et cetera. And that is really kind of forcing a degree of consolidation in the U.S. because it's very expensive to drill a well. You're looking at $4 to $6 million to basically do all the work to bring a well to production, fully producing. And because of that capital spend being so much, and you could still drill a dry well. I mean, that happens. The use of technology to really make sure you've got the right data and you're drilling in the right spot and you're going to have a set of hydrocarbons that's going to come out of the ground. It's really forcing a crazy amount of efficiency in the industry that wasn't there. And you also have foreign competition, right? So, I mean, basically Saudi Arabia, you can stick a straw in the ground and you can produce oil at mass. And they also have lower labor costs, and you could put things on tankers and move it over to the U.S. In mass very, very cheaply. So the need for efficiency in the U.S. is incredible. So I would say that upstream oil and gas is going to become increasingly competitive. I think it's really been competitive with the last couple oil routes. And I think as basically motor vehicles become more efficient, there's an increased use of EV technology, which is only I think anywhere from 6 to 7% of transportation. As that becomes more available, I think you're going to see further pressure on the energy industry to be much more efficient.
Yeah, because I was just reading about, what is it, Nikola?
I haven't heard of that. Sorry.
Yeah.
Is that a Tesla truck company or something like that?
Yeah. Okay. Nikola. So he's working in a truck that's supposed to be very similar but better than the F-150, because the F-150 is the best-selling truck, but there's an electric truck. It looks very, very sweet. But one of his big things that he's working on is building the semi-trucks, because as you know, semi-trucks, they depend on diesel. And if I'm not badly mistaken, I mean, if you drive around wherever you go, diesel prices, they've been around $3 a gallon for several years. The price of diesel never goes down. The cost of transporting goods is very, very expensive. So you imagine if you can make a vehicle, or I should say truck, yeah, I think they probably go from anywhere from like $300,000 to $500,000. They're very expensive. They're able to get 500 to 600 miles per charge. I mean, that's incredible. But what he's doing is he's also going to include the fuel. So you're leasing the truck from him, you're leasing the fuel, everything is going through him. So he's making all the money for it. But they're electric too. So, I mean, I don't know exactly how much diesel pollutes the air, but I can only imagine it's a substantial amount. It's all that black smoke. It's pretty nasty, to be honest. But it's very, very interesting where they're going to go with that. But I don't think the first truck is probably not going to be so, I think around like 2021, but they're not going to have like 15 to 20,000 of them to run like 25 or 27. It's going to be quite some time from now, but it'd be very interesting to see where that's going to go.
Yeah, I think we're seeing an increased use, an increase in the use of technology to reduce cost in what are called, otherwise sort of standard technology. So we have clients that run and operate very large buildings, like skyscrapers, et cetera. And you wouldn't think it, but there's actually software that helps regulate the use of all of the cooling and infrastructure, so like plumbing, utilities, et cetera, in these buildings. And so we've helped build custom software that interfaces with the HVAC systems, et cetera.
Very cool.
And you'd be surprised that even some of these buildings that are very recently built that are supposedly energy efficient are actually not all that efficient, and they can be made much more efficient with the use of software. And so just in the same manner that HVAC systems can be made much more efficient by using software, I think you're going to see it in other industries like transportation. You're going to see it in just when you get updates in your sort of your mobile device, right? A new app comes out, we try to make our code shorter, run cleaner, not idle as much in the background, don't send as much information to the server when you don't have to. You're going to see this sort of spiration of much more efficiency, right?
Where do you see phones? Because phones. You think about a phone. I don't know exactly how old you are. You look pretty young, but it's like
I remember when people had the big brick phones, I'm very aware of that. I remember using dial-up.
How much farther can we really get with technology when it comes to phones? You got phones. They can read your face to unlock your phone.
Right. I think the phone technology, from a physical hardware standpoint, doesn't have to become too advanced, because through the web browser, through just kind of Googling, right, or connecting to the internet. By connecting to the internet, I have access to servers elsewhere that are running the softwares that, quite literally, I have a supercomputer in my pocket because I have access to that computer through the internet. So I don't know that mobile devices necessarily, they probably just need to be a little bit more energy efficient. I'm sure they can always be a little bit faster. The camera can be a little bit nicer, but by having access to the internet, I have access to a supercomputer. So I think faster mobile speeds, right, 5G and some of these things are actually going to be revolutionary, because what I'm going to be able to do by accessing the data on those supercomputer devices is going to augment what I'm able to do on the phone through that sort of internet connection, more so than the physical device itself. And so the software, there's actually an algorithm written for, I think it was like 3G or 4G by some students either at MIT or might have been Cambridge, where basically they said, look, with the existing technology, just by changing the algorithm for how data is transferred, you can get 4 or 5 times your speed in terms of the amount of what are called packets, right? The size and nature of the data conveyed from device to device in basically a different packet structure. And so software is ultimately just math, and it's just a way of taking ones and zeros and making those ones and zeros convey to a physical medium as quickly and as efficiently as possible. And so we're still going to be more efficient at doing that.
Seeing that you're a big tech guy, 5G is like a big thing now. I think it's Verizon, T-Mobile, they're really spending a lot of money on it. What's like the big difference between 4G and 5G? Why do you think 5G is so important? How is that really going to help people? I know, there's some people like anti-5G. I don't know why, but.
So 5G is just a standard that is, if you think of the wireless spectrum, it really is just basically a component of the spectrum that allows data to transmit at a certain frequency. And 5G is just the rate at which data can transfer because of that wavelength in the spectrum, right? So when you sort of talked about trucking technologies and going to, sort of electricity, well, it takes about, 4 days to go from, let's say, San Diego to New York. Maybe it's a little bit shorter, maybe it's a little bit longer. Don't quote me on that. But if I'm trucking stuff from coast to coast, right? Because of the number of hours that a truck driver can legally drive in a day. Well, with technologies like 5G, I can basically have a convoy of vehicles on the road where I only have one driver or two drivers in that first vehicle, and I have the subsequent vehicles tethered ostensibly to the primary vehicle, and following that vehicle, and then transmitting data to and amongst each other about things that are going on the road fast enough where I can respond to road hazards and then also automatically sort of speed up, brake, and do things in a way that you kind of can't do with kind of existing legacy technologies. You just don't transmit data fast enough to get all the data points to make sure that you're sort of moving securely. So that's one example of how the technology could be applied, right, in terms of the communication to and among vehicles as it relates to sort of transportation and logistics. I think having more real-time data, you go somewhere on your phone tells you, hey, it's going to take you 12 minutes to get there. Google's data is incredibly accurate, but it's going to be exponentially more accurate when I'm able to transmit that data more frequently at faster speeds.
That's very interesting. This was actually a couple of years ago. I know there was some young kid, he's probably like 20, I think he's out of Florida. He engineered some program where they're going to have trucks that can drive automatically. Now imagine a semi driving automatically on an expressway. Some people kind of freak out, but it scans the entire road. It can read the stop sign. It can read, like, if there is a kid riding his bicycle, how long would it take me to stop before this kid stops? And it's able to calculate all that kind of stuff. Sounds like for something that to work really well, it would need something like 5G in order to work, or I should say be very, very highly effective.
Correct. Right. So you want, I think the motor industry is transportation industry is the best probably example of that, is because I want all these other devices communicating information to me. I don't want to be, as a vehicle going down the road, I don't want to be the only vehicle or only object collecting data. I want data being fed to me as well. And I think as you get technologies like 5G, you're going to be able to develop things that are much more efficient. I mean, I've heard it explained many, many times. I mean, I think the Uber technology chief, for example, has talked about this, right? Your car sits there for 60, 70% of the time, not being driven, right? It's a really inefficient use of capital. The result is that, we could not necessarily, I think there's a little bit of pandering as it relates to being able to hail a car and go anywhere you want. But certainly as it relates to transportation and the movement of goods and services, for some people, having access to that data and being able to sort of have not like a bus, but you have lots of independent, smaller vehicles get you from point A to point B when you're using public transportation is a much more rational use of capital. And so I think you're going to see, sort of a large shift in the movement of goods and the delivery of services because of technologies that are going to allow you to sort of move data much more quickly.
Now, why do you think, I don't want to get into too much, but why are some people scared of technology? Why do you think?
Well, kind of going back to our earlier discussion, right? Technology means change. Technology means growth. Technology means that old habits likely need to be adapted to new skills. And both companies and individuals are not always willing to change. They prefer to do things the old way. And, I think with younger generations, they're going to be basically born with an iPad in their hand, so to speak. And they're going to be much more adept at dealing with some of these technologies because they didn't have to learn them after they were already sort of set in their ways, so to speak. The old dogs don't like to learn new tricks is kind of the adage.
I'll never forget. I remember the year 2000. I was 19 at that time because it was my birthday. But I remember everybody thought every single computer was going to crash as soon as it hit 2000. The millennial. Everybody thought every computer was going to explode, the stock exchange, everything was going to just stop working. But it was funny because, on your computer, you can change the time. You could change it to 2000, 2001. Nothing ever happened. And as soon as it happened, nothing happened. Everybody was so fearful of nothing. It's very interesting how that is. What are some of the different types of programs do you think that we need that still haven't been built but should be built? And why do you think that they should be built?
Yeah, sort of two responses to that. One, we're constantly amazed by what our clients bring to us, right? Our clients bring us new and exciting challenges that we haven't thought of or haven't brought to the market, and or exceptional things, right? So people often say, oh, I have this unique idea. Well, I guarantee you other people have probably also had the idea. What matters is actually execution. It's bringing the idea forward and actually building the solution and then getting it out in the marketplace and getting feedback, because ideas aren't really kind of worth like a salt. So that's I guess kind of where I'd start with that. The technology that I personally think hasn't been developed is I think that in the healthcare system, there's not been really effective use of data technology to aggregate all of at least the metadata from patient records in a single place where everybody can, research scientists, doctors, et cetera, can review that data. Now, I'm not advocating sharing individual patient data. What I am advocating is having an anonymized repository where all researchers everywhere across the globe would be able to see basically, what treatments have been used on people, what those outcomes have been, other health things. Because from that, if you sort of open source that data, which was somewhat of an object of Obamacare, but I don't think actually occurred. It was like one of the good things in the law that kind of didn't happen, was that data would be singularly available for research scientists, MD, PhDs, statisticians, et cetera, to digest. And I think if you can put that out there, you're going to have, just like we're talking about sort of the advances in technology moving very quickly, I think you're going to see advances in healthcare that have otherwise not been the case. And frankly, it's a national tragedy that we haven't made this happen. We're one of the most advanced civilizations, on the ever. And then certainly in the US, we're one of the most wealthy civilizations per capita. And it's an eminently practical thing that we would be able to build this public database, and we could do it. We can collect the data points. There's only 330 million, people in the US where we could sort of regularly collect those data points. We could build a database that can house all that information. It's really not that hard. It just hasn't been done.
I agree with that, because I used to work in physical therapy back in the day. So I worked in healthcare. My wife also works in healthcare. One of the biggest problems that they have is, my God, they use a lot of programs. When you log into the computer, I mean, there's like 8 different applications. You have to go into all these different programs. I'm like, my God, why don't you just put everything in one or two things and make it so much easier to be able to do things? It's the same thing with my wife. It's like every morning when she logs into her computer, it takes her 15 minutes to load every single program because there's just so much stuff and it's overwhelming. But like for physical therapists who are doctors, and doctors who work at hospitals, like imagine if you're able to put in the patient's, obviously because of HIPAA and stuff like that, you're not going to have the patient's name, but if there's a certain modality they're using, let's say someone has a shoulder cuff injury or something, and you can see from, first week to 8th week, it's able to improve by 80% or something. Not everybody in the world is going to probably be doing the same exercise for this type of injury. Sure. But if people were able to see what are the majority of doctors who are treating this injury or this disease or this thing, instead of having to sit there and read through journals and that kind of thing, it'd make it so much easier, just like what you said. And at the end of the day, anybody who's in healthcare, most of them anyways, they want their patients to do very, very well. So yeah, having better software like that would be wonderful. Yeah,
I mean, so I'll give you an example of where I am aware that, some certain hospitals, they do actually share data. They're very sort of open to that. They're not, they really should be distinguishing them on service quality and patient outcomes and lower prices. That's really where hospitals should compete. It is kind of a blind system right now. They're trying to bring some pricing transparency. But I had a friend who had bone cancer, and the only reason he is still alive today is because the hospital he was at was sharing data with a hospital in France. And it just so happened that this one other person had this rare bone cancer that he had. They tried this treatment, they tried it on one other person in one other location, and it was just kind of 2 people who had it in France. And there was like an 80% survival rate with this one type of treatment they did. So they did this on my buddy, and he's okay. But had they not had that data, it would have been much more difficult for them to treat this very, very real, very, very rare disorder, very, very rare cancer. And so that data is not sort of publicly available. it doesn't hurt anybody to make that data available, and it's something that could be very easily done through technology. I've talked to large medical groups that are sort of trying to move in this direction, but just like I said, with large companies, the folks who are frankly most able to innovate, they kind of have analysis paralysis. They're trying to use existing tools. They're not willing to use existing technology, or not willing to use new technology. They're trying to use existing sort of off-the-shelf software and trying to mangle it to their needs. The results are just not there. And frankly, this is something that could have been done 10 years ago.
Yeah, well, I think too, probably the big problem is obviously, like when I was working in physical therapy, I was a health and wellness director. We had what we call a medically orientated gym. So it's a great program where after people do physical therapy, they have a gym where they go to and they have somebody who's watching them exercise and making sure that they're following a program, where most people, they go to the gym, they just do what they see other people doing. You don't really have a program to follow. Now, it's very expensive to have a program, probably what you're talking about. Companies probably don't want to pay it. And then also security. Like I remember when we hired a software company to install some stuff on our computers, that way we were able to use it. I think it took like 6 months for them to get clearance. I mean, it took forever.
Yeah. I mean, we do plenty of HIPAA compliant software development and HIPAA compliant. We have folks in the medical space, we have folks in the dental space, we have folks sort of all over. And the primary difficulty of pulling some of that data is interfacing with some of these old legacy, so not legacy, but sometimes you have these small little clinics that have kind of built their own software. The issue is getting the software or the data off of those machines. But in general, I would argue that you could probably have a team of 20 or 30 people that could build the solution that I just described. And in terms of supporting those records, it could be run for a couple thousand a month very easily and have all that data available in terms of like how it's stored, et cetera. It could very easily be publicly available. So I think somebody just needs to have the gumption to put up the money to sort of build it. And I think the world would be a much better place.
Yeah, I completely agree. The big thing is you have to change the mindset of these companies. What's in it for me? Of course, right. What's in it for you is you get to treat your patients in the best possible way, and it's a win-win for everybody. But you have to think about that. It's like, and then the thing is, based on what software are they going to be? Could everybody use this?
Structurally, it's in the best interest of most hospital groups to keep their data private, and then also try to grow the size of their data set and keep it proprietary so that they can attract people from, across the country, across the globe to use their facilities and services. But I don't know that that's in the best interest of our fellow men. So I think that's the technology that I think needs to be built, but hasn't.
All right. Yeah. I just have a couple questions. I know it is getting late here. Now, when you look at some of your clients, what are some of the biggest problems you say that they face?
Yeah, I think it's process. I think the biggest problem they face is process, right? So we've had clients come to us where they want to solve a problem, and they're like, we want to accomplish this thing. And I sat in a boardroom recently with a very large company here in Salt Lake City. We had their entire senior engineering staff, and I just asked them questions. I said, well, what are you doing for this? I say, well, we don't do that. What are you doing for this? Well, we've thought about that, but we haven't implemented. What do you do for this? Right? It's really modern engineering practices. What are you doing? We're not doing any of those things. Okay, well, it's actually necessary to accomplish your objectives. If you're trying to basically be this agile, data-driven firm where you're basically responding to your clients based on the information you're getting from the marketplace in real time, you have to have other processes in place which allow you to move quickly enough to make the development changes in your environment, make the development changes with your team, take those actionable insights and run it through sort of a pipeline, literal engineering pipeline, in a way that you can have something basically on dev and then in production the same day. And lots of large companies are sort of not doing that. So because they're not continually training on the best practices, they're not continually training on what is the best process, and they're not continually readjusting processes to get more efficient. We put our guys through really rigorous training. Every Friday, we have internal training with the project managers. Then twice a week, we have internal training with the engineers. That is how much we're training our people, because that is how quickly the industry is moving.
Yeah, so you guys are adapting. So for anybody who's listening, who's like they're not changing, they're not growing, hey, you better. If you don't, you're going to be out of business like a lot of these big companies that thought they'd still be around. Now we're starting to wind down, but I know for some people who are listening, like, man, dang, Ian, he's a very positive guy, very outgoing. I mean, this guy got his stuff together. What are some of the daily habits and what keeps you motivated?
Yeah, motivation is family. I think that's number one. Two, it's if you do something that you enjoy, it's not work, it's fun, and I think that's a big differentiator for a lot of people. So I'm not advocating for people to chase your dreams. I think that's a little bit of a mistake and misnomer. But I am advocating that people try to love what they do, and if you can do that, if you can find sort of joy in that, you're ultimately going to be much happier, much more fulfilled in life, and you'll find that you'll probably be much more successful. And then, I think sort of the next thing is that in terms of my process and how I go about things is just like I said, I try to do the difficult things in the morning and let the rest of the day be simple stuff that I've just kind of can work on, right? Free myself to work on the business, not in the business.
If you could go back to, let's say, about 20 years old, would you do anything different?
Yeah, I think the thing that I would do different is I would probably look to figure out who the most successful people in the industries that I was interested in were doing. And I'd read everything I could about them. And then I'd go make the decisions that I've made, because I probably would have saved a year or two in terms of some of the stuff that I've done that now, right? And it's been wonderful. And I've probably saved myself 10 years in terms of where I'm trying to go, what I'm trying to accomplish with the business, where the team's trying to go. But if I could have identified very quickly that, hey, go, don't pay attention to what your competition's doing. Don't pay attention to what the guy down the street's doing. Go look at what the best people in the industry are doing, learn from them, and then take those best practices, roll that into what you're doing either personally or professionally, and then go innovate. And I think if you can do that, you're going to save yourself a world of pain.
Very, very well said. Now, for anybody who's listening, what would you love for them to take away from this podcast episode?
I think the number one thing I would take away is, if you're not as a business intentionally innovating, then you're going to fall behind. I think that's the primary takeaway, is because the world is moving faster and faster. And if you're not intentionally innovating, you are going to fall behind. And
unfortunately, a lot of companies have definitely done that. Yeah, I think one of the big ones I look at is like Ford and GM. GM, they hired a new CEO. They got these brand new cars. They're all the old classics, but they look beautiful, and they've been doing really, really well. Now, just to wind down now, I really, really appreciate you being on here. Now, for anybody who's listening, how can they reach out to you? How can they find you on social media? Maybe, they're thinking about maybe being a potential client. Like, who would be a perfect client for you? What would you be able to do for them? That kind of thing.
Sure. First, if you want to reach us, zibtek.com, www.zibtek.com. You can go to the contact form, fill that out. We also have all our process on there and our resources page. We publish actually all of our process in terms of engineering process in our resources pages. So you can review all that. We also have a sort of a public company presentation. You can also email hello@zibtek.com. And I'll certainly see that. In terms of, sorry, what was the second question?
No, like, who would be a perfect client for you?
Perfect client. Well, this is why I forgot, is because we serve startups, we serve mid-sized businesses, and we serve enterprise businesses. So it's really anybody who has a software development need that, we have no minimums. So we do projects that are, a couple hours to projects that go on, 5+ years. So if you have a need, if you need to augment your team, and you have a 2 to 5 year time horizon for a major idea or technology shift, those are probably our ideal clients, but we'll help anybody because we started as a small company 10 years ago, and we understand what it takes to get things off the ground.
And where do you see you guys in the next 5-10 years, you think?
Yeah, I think so. We have grown our team 2019 to today. That's hard to say. 2019 to today, we've grown our team probably about 60-70%, and we're actually refining that team. So I think our growth rate will slow a little bit. Historically, we've been growing about 30% a year, like across everything. We think that'll slow to maybe 10 or 20%, just because that's kind of reasonable. There's only, based on our math, sort of 100 companies in the U.S. that are about as big as we are. So we're getting closer to the top, which is always great. But we hope to see that in 3 to 5 years, we have really demonstrated that we have a culture of engineering excellence and continue to refine that. I think that's more important actually than how big we are.
Sweet. Yeah. And become a Fortune 100 company.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah, that'll be ideal.
All right, Ian, thank you so very much, man, for being a Power of Your Voice podcast. I greatly appreciate it, buddy.
You bet. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Johnny here. Thank you for listening to the Power of Your Voice podcast. I would absolutely love to get your feedback on this episode and how it impacted you. Reach out to me on Instagram by sending a direct message to username Voice Podcast. If someone in your life could benefit from this episode, share it with them and check out thepowerofyourvoice.com to read blogs on each podcast episode and learn more about what was discussed. And please, leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. This lets me know you find this show valuable. And thank you for listening.